Welcome back. Now it's the final day of Standard Bank's Africa Unlocked 2025 conference, and our head of news, Brownyn Seaborne, is on the ground with coverage of the event. Brownyn, it's over to you.
Yes, it's the third and final day of the Africa Unlocked conference here at the Norval Foundation in Cape Town, being hosted, of course, by Standard Bank. And if we take a look at what played out yesterday, there was an increased focus on Africa owning its narrative. In the opening remarks by the Vice President of Botswana, we had him say that Africa doesn't need to be saved. Instead, it should be seen as a platform of opportunity. And running on that opportunity theme, we had panel discussions around trade wars, because even in the uncertainty, there are opportunities for Africa. And we also took a look at various discussions around small and medium enterprises and how they're the growth engines of the African continent. So lots and lots of talk, but the emphasis is not on this being a talk shop. The real success is taking what is said here and making it into action. And so I caught up with CEO of Standard Bank, Sim Tshabalala, late yesterday to find out how this doesn't just become a talk shop. Let's take a look.
No, Brownyn, it's not a talk shop at all. Half of the people, there are about 200 companies here. Half are South African, half operate on the continent. If you speak to them, and in fact I see the gentleman being interviewed over there, you speak to them as to why they're here. They're here firstly to get data and information, and secondly to connect with people that are either part of their supply chains or people that could potentially be part of their supply chains. And the conversations are rich. We had this conference last year, and a lot of people are back because they saw those opportunities last year. So absolutely right, we need to avoid talk shops where nothing productive happens. This one is productive, and it's productive because the people here are people who identify the opportunities associated with the growth of Africa. And they also understand that they need the networks and the relationships, and they will execute on those. I mean, I'm very excited. And from a Standard Bank perspective, for example, we can talk to people about Simply Blue, which is a product that provides them with efficient payment and banking products, or BizFlex, which provides them with products that are flexible, payment products and lending products that are flexible. And it's a great opportunity for us as well as these clients.
So for Sim, him really seeing that action is going to come from this conference. But that's not all that we spoke about. He was part of a panel earlier yesterday on changing Africa's narrative, re-owning the space as the continent. And so I started off by asking him, why is now the time that Africa has to do this and reclaim the narrative? And here's what he had to say.
I think the uncertainty that is currently in existence can be understood in historical context. The period of globalization we're going through now is similar to the period of deglobalization between 1815 and 1914. And there are lessons to be learned about what happens during deglobalization, and we should learn those as Africans. That's one. In other words, trade routes change, trade patterns change, and one should learn to identify the opportunities that arise from that dislocation first. Secondly, the Pope that was appointed now is an Augustinian. St. Augustine of Hippo was an African. The third point is to say that economics associated with the growth in the demographic dividend, as well as the infrastructure that the world needs, regardless of what's happening. The world needs the copper, the cobalt, the manganese, and indeed the rare earth minerals that South Africa, Tanzania, Madagascar, and a couple of countries are rich in. And therefore, if you think about the infrastructure needed to have access to all of those resources, it provides massive opportunities. And things like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area are formal institutional processes that help us to take advantage of those opportunities. And today, this conference is just part of that. Work between small enterprises, government, philanthropies, thinking creatively about how to have access to these opportunities. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, it's an exciting time.
It does. And it's maybe about seeing through the noise, which is what you're saying, right?
Because remember, whenever there's volatility, it always reverts to the mean. And during the tough times, identify opportunities that you can exploit during the tough times and envision what it looks like post the tough times.
I guess it's also about shifting perceptions about the continent. We did have the Vice President of Botswana saying things this morning in his opening address that, we should move away from this idea of Africa needing to be saved. It needs to be seen as this platform of opportunity. It feels like a rather mammoth task, though, to change those perceptions. So where do we start?
We start by having conversations like we're having this morning. We start by looking at the real data. For example, aid as a proportion of the funding needed for activity on the continent is small. You saw that from the presentation made by Gulam, our economist. Trade is actually a large proportion thereof, but Africans don't trade enough between themselves. Why? Because of trade barriers, non-tariff barriers. Having identified those should be removed. In that context, in answer to your question, African leaders, whether they're in the private sector or the public sector, need to speak up at the appropriate fora, like today and other global forums. They need to speak up.
Speaking up and speaking out and putting those data points forward to say this is actually the African story, this is challenging the perceptions, because all of that is to encourage investment, right?
Indeed. And the point here is, on the one hand, you've got the great demographic. The largest of 1.4 billion people getting healthier, getting wealthier, more productive, more connected. Great opportunities for an entrepreneur in that context. Infrastructure, as I said, roads, bridges, ports, to get the minerals and the manufactured goods to the ports, fantastic opportunity. This morning, just to end off, we had a lovely story by a person involved in agriculture about the movement of apples from one part of South Africa to another part of Africa, and the process that went into that. So we need more of that, the intra-Africa trade.
And you highlight something really important there. You talk about entrepreneurs, yes, and we talk about small business. Yeah. Is that still the growth driver in Africa? Because it's long been touted that that's where the job creation is. That's where we're really going to see a lot of exciting things happen. Do you think that is still the case, that it's small business, entrepreneurs, that is really pushing the continent forward?
I absolutely think so, Brownyn. Again, the entrepreneurs here today and the conversations we're having with them prove that point. When you build the infrastructure that I'm referring to, the roads, the ports, the bridges, you need lots of activity in the value chain, which includes those entrepreneurs. And one plea we would make in this context is, let's speed up the payment processes and not hold up payments to these entrepreneurs. Why not make it immediate rather than 90 days? Or alternatively, as banks, provide them with the products and services that they need to get paid immediately, like invoice discounting, for example, just as an example.
That was Sim Tshabalala, the CEO of a Standard Bank, and him giving us some insight into what's playing out here, the discussions that are happening.